covered in chicken wire instead of boards, so Pete had no trouble seeing what there was to see. All the eating tables and booths were gone from the restaurant part, and the kitchen part was just a dim hole with wire sticking out of the walls and some of the ceiling tiles hanging down. But the place was not exactly unfurnished. In the center, surrounded by folding chairs, 2 old card tables had been pushed together. On this double-wide surface were half a dozen filthy tin ashtrays, several decks of greasy bicycle cards, and a caddy of poker chips. The walls were decorated with 20 or 30 magazine gatefolds. Pete inspected these with great interest. He knew about pussies, had glimpsed more than a few on HBO and CinemaSpank before his folks got wise and blocked the premium cable channels. He wasn't sure what the big deal was. To him, they looked sold harder. Sandwiches purchased at Roselli's or Subway. Mounted on the wall beside the counter where people once ordered Whoppers and Whalers, Pete discovered another poster. This one was Justin Bieber. Justin's teeth had been blacked out, and someone had added a sticker tattoo to one cheek. Red ink devil horns sprouted from Justin's mop top. There were darts sticking out of his face. Magic markered on the wall above the poster was mouth, 15 points, nose, 25 points, eyes, 30 points each. Pete pulled out the darts and backed across the big empty room until he came to a black mark on the floor. Printed here was Bieber line. Pete stood behind it and shot the 6 darts 10 or 12 times. On his last try, he got 125 points. He thought that was pretty good. He imagined George and Normie Theriault applauding. He went over to one of the mesh-covered windows, staring out at the empty concrete islands where the gas pumps used to be, and the traffic beyond. Light traffic. He supposed that when summer came, it would once more be bumper to bumper with tourists and summer people, unless his dad was right and the price of gas went to $7 a gallon and everybody stayed home. Now what? He'd played darts, he'd looked at enough shaved pussies to last him, well, maybe not a lifetime, but at least a few months. There were no murders to solve, so now what? Vodka, he decided. That was what came next. He'd try a few sips just to prove he could, and so future brags would have that vital ring of truth. Then, he supposed, he would pack up his shit and go back to Murphy Street. He would do his best to make his adventure sound interesting, thrilling, even. But, in truth, this place wasn't such of a much. Just a place where the really big kids could come to play cards and make out with girls and not get wet when it rained. But booze, that was something. He took his saddlebag over to the mattresses and sat down, being careful to avoid the stains, of which there were many. He took out the vodka bottle and studied it with a certain grim fascination. At 10 going on 11, he had no particular longing to sample adult pleasures. The year before, he had hawked one of his grandfather's cigarettes and smoked it behind the 7-Eleven. Smoked half of it, anyway. Then he had leaned over and spewed his lunch between his sneakers. He'd obtained an interesting but not very valuable piece of information that day. Beans and Franks didn't look great when they went into your mouth, but at least they tasted good. When they came back out, they looked fucking horrible and tasted worse. His body's instant and emphatic rejection of that American spirit suggested to him that booze would be no better and probably worse. But if he didn't drink at least some, any brag would be a lie. And his brother George had lie radar, at least when it came to Pete. I'll probably puke again, he thought, then said, "Good news is, I won't be the first in this dump." That made him laugh again. He was still smiling when he unscrewed the cap and held the mouth of the bottle to his nose. Some smell, but not much. Maybe it was water instead of vodka, and the smell was just a leftover. He raised the mouth of the bottle to his mouth, sort of hoping that was true and sort of hoping it wasn't. He didn't expect much, and he certainly didn't want to get drunk and maybe break his neck trying to climb back down from the loading dock, but he was curious. His parents loved this stuff. "Dares go first," he said for no reason at all, and took a small sip. It wasn't water, that was for sure. It tasted like hot, light oil. He swallowed, mostly in surprise. The vodka trailed heat down his throat and then exploded in his stomach. "Holy Jesus!" Pete yelled. Tears sprang to his eyes. He held the bottle out at arm's length as if it had bitten him. But the heat in his stomach was already subsiding, and he felt pretty much okay. Not drunk, and not like he was gonna puke either. He tried another little sip now that he knew what to expect. Heat in the mouth, heat in the throat, and then boom in the stomach. Actually not bad. Now he felt a tingling in his arms and hands. Maybe his neck too. Not the pins and needles sensation you got when a limb went to sleep, but more like something was waking up. Pete raised the bottle to his lips again and lowered it. There was more to worry about than falling off a loading dock or crashing his bike on the way home. He wondered briefly if you could get arrested for drunk biking, and supposed you could. Having a few swigs of vodka so you could brag on it was one thing, but if he drank enough to get loaded, his mother and father would know when they came home. It would only take one look. Trying to act sober wouldn't help. They drank, their friends drank, and sometimes they drank too much. They would know the signs. Also, there was the dreaded hangover to consider. Pete and George had seen their mom and dad dragging around the house with red eyes and pale faces on a good many Saturday and Sunday mornings. When bills, they told you to turn the TV down, and music was absolutely verboten. The hangover looked like the absolute opposite of fun. Still maybe one more sip, my mother. He took a slightly larger swallow and shouted, "Soon we have liftoff!" This made him laugh. He felt a little lightheaded, but it was a totally pleasant feeling. Smoking, he didn't get. Drinking, he guessed he did. He got up, staggered a little, caught his balance, and laughed some more. "Jump into that fucking sand pit all you want, sugar bears," he told the empty restaurant. "I'm fucking stinko, and fucking stinko is better." This was very funny, and he laughed hard. Am I really stinko? Just 3 sips? He didn't think so, but he was definitely high. Enough was enough. "Drink responsibly," he told the empty restaurant and snorted. He'd hang out here for a while and wait for it to wear off. An hour should do it, maybe 2. Until 3 o'clock, say. He didn't have a wristwatch, but he'd be able to tell 3 o'clock from the chimes of St. Joseph's, which was only a mile or so away. Then he'd leave, first hiding the vodka for possible further research, and putting the wedge back under the door. His first stop when he got back to the neighborhood was going to be the 7-Eleven, where he'd buy some of that really strong tea-berry gum to take the smell of booze off his breath. He'd heard kids say vodka was the thing to steal out of your parents' liquor cabinet because it had no smell, but Pete was now a wiser child than he'd been an hour ago. "Besides," he told the hollowed-out restaurant in a lecturely tone, "I bet my eyes are red, just like Dad's when he has 2 Marnie Mantinis." He paused. That wasn't quite right. But what the fuck? He gathered up the darts, went back to the Bieber line, and shot them. He missed Justin with all but one, and this struck Pete as the most hilarious thing of all. As he gathered them up, he sang a few lines of Baby, Justin's big hit from last year. He wondered if Justin could have a hit with a song called My Baby Shaves Her Pussy, and this struck him so funny that he laughed until he had to bend over with his hands on his knees. When the laughter passed, he wiped double snot hangers from his nose, flicked them onto the floor.
In a quarter mile,
There
turn
goes your
right
good
onto
restaurant
Southeast
rating, he
Kangley
thought.
Road.
Sorry, Burger King. And then he trudged back to the Bieber line. He had even worse luck the second time. He wasn't seeing double or anything, he just couldn't nail the beef. Also, he felt a little sick
Take
after
the
all.
next right onto
Not
Southeast
much, but he was
Kangley
glad
Road.
he hadn't tried a 4th sip. "I would have popped my pop off," he said. He laughed, then uttered a ringing belch that burned coming up. Ugh. He left the darts where they were and went back to the mattresses.
In a quarter mile, turn
He
left
thought of
onto
using his
Southeast
magnifying glass to see if
263rd
anything
Street.
really small was crawling there, and then decided he didn't want to know. He thought about eating some of his Oreos, but he was afraid of what they might do to his stomach. It felt, let's face it, a little tender. He lay down and laced his hands behind his head. He had heard that when you got really drunk, everything started spinning around.
Take the next left onto
Nothing like
Southeast
that was happening
263rd
then,
Street,
but
then
he wouldn't
turn
mind a
left
little.
onto 119th Drive
Sleep it off,
Southeast.
kind of. But not too long. No, not too long. That would be bad. If he wasn't home when his folks
Make a
came home,
U-turn,
and if they
then
couldn't
turn
find
right
him,
onto
he would be in
Southeast
trouble.
263rd Street.
Probably George would be too for going off without him. The question was, could he wake himself up when the St. Joseph's chimes
In
struck?
600 feet, turn left onto
He realized in
124th
those
Avenue
last few seconds
Southeast.
of consciousness that he'd just
Turn
have to
left
hope
onto
so,
124th Avenue
because
Southeast.
he was going. He closed his eyes and slept in the deserted restaurant. Outside, in the southbound travel lane of I-95, a station wagon of indeterminate make and vintage appeared. It was traveling well below the posted minimum turnpike speed. A fast-moving semi came up behind it and veered into the passing lane, blatting its air horn. The station wagon, almost coasting now, veered into the entrance lane of the rest area, ignoring the big sign reading, "Closed, no services, next gas and food 27 miles." It struck 4 of the orange barrels blocking the lane, sent them rolling, and came to a stop about 70 yards from the abandoned restaurant building. The driver's side door opened, but nobody got out. There were no, "Hey stupid, your door's open" chimes. It just hung, silently ajar. If Pete Simmons had been watching instead of snoozing, he wouldn't have been able to see the driver. The station wagon was splattered with mud and the windshield was smeared with it, which was strange, because there had been no rain in northern New England for over a week, and the turnpike was perfectly dry. The car sat there a little distance up the entrance ramp under a cloudy April sky. The barrels it had knocked over came to a stop. The driver's door hung open, like an invitation.
I'm stopping it there because it gets really gory after this part, and I don't want to hear it again. I really don't understand why some people drop acid. Which is what Steven said that he did to write this story. Is so
In 1,000 feet, turn left onto Southeast 263rd Street.
so disgusting. Okay.
Take the next left onto Southeast 263rd Street. In 1,000 feet, turn right onto 119th Drive Southeast.
119. Ooh, these people drive like terrible.
Take the next right onto 119th Drive Southeast, then turn left onto Southeast 263rd Court. Take the next left onto Southeast 263rd Court, then your destination will be on the left.
Shit.
Your destination is on the left.
I know, right? Hello, I'm your Happy Census interviewer. Your census. You guys are on your way out. When do you want me to come back? Later this afternoon? Okay, all right, thank you.
2. Doug Clayton, '09 Prius.
Oh.
Doug Clayton was an insurance man from Bangor, bound for Portland, where he had a reservation at the Sheraton Hotel. He expected to be there by 2 o'clock at the latest. That would leave plenty of time for an afternoon nap, a luxury he could rarely afford, before searching out dinner on Congress Street. Tomorrow he would present himself at the Portland Conference Center bright and early, take a name tag, and join 400 other agents in a conference called Fire, Storm, and Flood, Insuring for Disaster in the 21st Century. As he passed the mile 82 marker, Doug was closing in on his own personal disaster. But it was nothing the Portland Conference would cover. His briefcase and suitcase were in the back seat. Lying on top of the bucket was the Bible, King James Version. Doug would have no other. Doug was one of 4 lay preachers at the Church of the Holy Redeemer, and when it was his turn to preach, he liked to call his Bible the ultimate insurance manual. Doug had taken Jesus Christ as his personal savior after 10 years of drinking that spanned his late teens and most of his 20s. This decade-long spree ended with a wrecked car and 30 days in the Penobscot County Jail. He'd gotten down on his knees in that smelly, coffin-sized cell on his first night there, and he'd gotten down on them every night since. "Help me get better," he had prayed that first time, and every time since. It was a simple prayer that had been answered, first 2-fold, then 10-fold, then 100-fold. He thought that in another few years, he'd be up to 1,000-fold, and the best thing, heaven was waiting at the end of it all. His Bible was well thumbed because he read it every day. He loved all the stories in it, but the one he loved best, the one he meditated on most often, was the parable of the Good Samaritan. He had preached on that passage from the Gospel of Luke several times, and the Redeemer congregation had always been generous with their praise afterward. God bless them. Doug supposed it was because the story was so personal to him. A priest had passed by the robbed and beaten traveler lying at the side of the road. So had a Levite. Then who comes along? A nasty, Jew-hating Samaritan. But that's the one who helps, nasty Jew-hater or not. He cleanses the traveler's cuts and scrapes and then binds them up. He loads the traveler on his donkey and fronts him a room at the nearest inn. So which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to him who fell among thieves? Jesus inquires of the hotshot young lawyer who asked him about the requirements for eternal life. And the hotshot, clearly not stupid with life, the one who shewed mercy. If Doug Clayton had a horror of anything, it was being like the Levite in that story, of refusing to help when help was needed, of passing by on the other side. So when he saw the muddy station wagon parked a little way up the entrance ramp of the deserted rest area, the downed orange barrels in front of it, the driver's door hanging ajar, he hesitated only a moment before flicking on his turn signal and pulling in. He parked behind the wagon, put on his 4-ways, and started to get out. Then he noticed that there appeared to be no license plate on the back of the station wagon. Although there was so much damn mud, it was hard to tell for sure. Doug took his cell phone out of the Prius's center console and made sure it was on. Being a good Approaching the plateless dog in the car without caution. He walked toward the station wagon. Hi, hello. Everything okay? He walked up the door, squeezing it.